Senators were sworn in on Tuesday afternoon to administer impartial justice in former President Trump's second impeachment trial. A number of Republicans claim the trial is unconstitutional, arguing the Constitution stipulates impeachment applies only to a sitting president. GOP Senator Rand Paul introduced a vote forcing senators to go on the record about their thoughts on the trial's constitutionality. The motion was tabled, but 45 Republicans, including Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, joined Senator Paul in voting to dismiss the impeachment trial altogether. The move signaled there could be growing support among the GOP against convicting the former president. Earlier Tuesday, Senate Republican leaders invited George Washington University constitutional law professor Jonathan Turley to answer their questions on impeachment. Turley previously testified against President Trump's first impeachment before the House Judiciary Committee in 2019. Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois joins me now. She was on her way to the Senate floor when the Capitol was breached. That riot is at the center of this impeachment trial. Senator Duckworth has expressed support for convicting former President Trump. Senator, welcome to Red and Blue.
Thanks for having me on.
So much of the discussion over impeachment now seems to be a debate over process. Do you think, Senator, there's a danger that the further we get from January 6th, the more the focus moves away from what actually took place on that day?
Well, you saw that is exactly what Rand Paul is trying to do today, was to shift the focus away from the fact that we all watched live on television as Donald Trump incited an insurrection against our nation's capital. And he wants to move this discussion away from that into a constitutional law one, which, by the way, the constitutional law experts have said that it is perfectly constitutional to be able to try Donald Trump in this way and to bar him from holding future office even after he has left off. He's already left office. So this is perfectly constitutional, but it is in the Republicans' best interest to move this discussion away from exactly what happened, which was people carrying the American flag stormed the United States Capitol and attempted to find senators and were carrying zip ties to try to find us to stop a democratic process. And all that was done at the urging of Donald Trump.
What do you make of that vote today, though? 45 senators, including Mitch McConnell.
Well, I wish I could say I was surprised, but I wasn't. I am very disappointed in my Republican counterparts. Perhaps they forgot what happened. I'm sitting in my office here in the nation's capital. There's still broken glass, bits of broken glass on the floor. The window right next to me is still boarded up with plywood where the insurrectionists attempted to break through that window, shattering glass everywhere. The doorway behind me has battering ram marks where they tried to batter that door down. This is all very real. And again, they have now seemed to have forgotten what these insurrectionists did, and they did it at the urging of the President of the United States. You know, no one is above the law in this country. And what they did today was to try to shift the focus away from that and give Donald Trump a free pass. That's not acceptable.
Let's turn to the new division of power in the Senate. Here is Minority Leader Mitch McConnell earlier today arguing to keep the filibuster. Let's listen.
Republicans understand you don't destroy the Senate for a fleeting advantage. Our friends across the aisle must see the same. I've talked a lot about principle. We should also make this a little more tangible. So let's take a look at what would happen if, in fact, the legislative filibuster was gone. If the Democratic majority were to attack the filibuster, they would guarantee themselves immediate chaos, especially in this 50-50 Senate.
So he later agreed to move forward with a power-sharing deal modeled after a 2001 agreement, the last time the Senate was evenly split. And he did that after Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema indicated they would not vote to end the filibuster, a key part of that 2001 agreement. So, Senator, who is the real winner here? And can Democrats pass legislation with the filibuster in place?
I think we can pass legislation, but I will tell you that I think that every option needs to remain on the table. Remember that it is the Republicans who got rid of the filibuster in other categories, except for this one last one, which is the legislation. Remember that it is It is actually Mitch McConnell who shoved through Supreme Court nominees in just a week. It is Mitch McConnell who denied Merrick Garland a confirmation, even a hearing for an entire year. So, I mean, irony isn't even the right word to describe. It's hypocritical what he is saying now. Bottom line is, I would rather continue with the filibuster, but that means that Republicans must work with us in good, in good conscience, and come together and work together to pass President Biden's legislation that's going to help the American people. But if they are going to stop and be obstructionists and not allow legislation to pass that's going to help working families across this country, whether it is a new payment for COVID relief, whether it is support for working families, whether it is an infrastructure package, then we need to look at the filibuster reform, because frankly, they've not shown themselves to be good, honest actors when it comes to working together with Democrats.
I also want to ask you about the new Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, who retired as an Army general 4 years ago. Under the law, the Defense Secretary must be a civilian or out of uniform for at least 7 years. You said you would not approve the waiver, which Congress eventually granted before his confirmation. Senator, why did you oppose that waiver?
Because I believe strongly in the principle that we should have civilian control of the military. And when you have someone who just so recently left military service, they still have too many ties to the Pentagon. They're still too compromised by their relationships with the Pentagon, and they've not become civilian enough in order to return back and continue to serve as a civilian. I'll give you an example. I voted against the waiver for General Mattis also. I mean, he surrounded himself with military officers once he got back in there, because that's what he was comfortable with. We need to have civilian control. It's why the United States is the greatest democracy on the face of the earth, and it's why we are not run by military juntas, is because it is the civilian that is in charge of our government. It is civilians who are in charge of the military, not the other way around.
Finally, Senator, part of President Biden's focus today has been on using his executive authority to fight racism against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, also known as the AAPI community. But I want to get your thoughts on the president's cabinet, because recently Congressman Mark Takano, Democrat of California, told PBS that he was, quote, profoundly disappointed that the president did not appoint a person of Asian American or Pacific Islander descent to serve as a cabinet secretary. Do you share that disappointment?
Yes, I am profoundly disappointed also that there is not a member of the AAPI community at the cabinet secretary level. I think that for a cabinet that is so historically diverse, to not have an AAPI, someone of AAPI descent at the cabinet level is a real missed opportunity. And
what is the message you think that a failure to include an AAPI cabinet secretary sends to the AAPI community?
Well, I think it sends two messages. One, that you're not important to us, that you're not diverse enough, you're not important to us. And the other is that you can be taken for granted. Now, remember that AAPIs turned out in Georgia in significant numbers. AAPIs have 4% of the vote in many, many states. That's the margin of victory in many, many states, whether that's California, well, much more in California, but if you look at Nevada and other places, it just says that potentially we're taking AAPIs for granted. And I'm going to make sure we send the message that we will not take AAPIs for granted, that AAPI issues are just as important to this nation as those of other community groups, and that AAPIs are Americans just like everyone else. And so in my work as a co-chair, as the vice chair of the Democratic National Committee, I will be making sure that we work hard to reach out to the AAPI community.
Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth. Senator, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's good to be on.